Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Kigali for the first ever Eisenhower Fellowships African Regional Conference. It's a big deal. My name is Lorna Irungu Masharia. I am class of 2016. I'm going to be your co-host, so you're going to be seeing quite a bit of me over the next couple of days. I'm going to be introducing my fellow co-host who's going to take us through most of this morning's program. I just want to give you a couple of guidelines for the rest of this morning as we await His Excellency, who should be here in a couple of minutes. So once he's in the room, we should all stay seated. Please put your phones on silent. If you want to be able to tweet about the conversation or follow it or put something online, the code for the Wi-Fi is KCC. So it will ask you to put the conference code in, it's just KCC. Restrooms, when you get out of this room, you'll turn right all the way down to the corridor, and then you will turn left. After this, when His Excellency comes in, we're going to have the formalities. They're going to have a session with President of Eisenhower, Mr. George Dalama, and then we're going to, at some point, have all the fellows are going to be asked to come out of the room and to have a photo with His Excellency. So at that point, we'll kindly request everyone else to stay seated for that duration of time. We're going to have a conversation about globalization. We're going to have the afternoon sessions, which I think I can see Dina in the room. It's going to be moderated by her on digital divide. So we have quite an exciting program, and I hope all of you have physical copies of the program for the rest of the day. So for now, I just wanted to say Karibuni, welcome to Kigali, and I'm going to hand over to Diana, who is going to take you through the rest of this morning's program.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. How's everyone feeling this very, very, very lovely morning? Excited? Yes, I'm really happy to see a lot of faces here. My cohort is here, Sue Earn, Fatima. Great to have you here. I will be going through the program later on when His Excellency arrives, but I think Lorna has just taken you through the basics, especially in terms of housekeeping, the photo opportunities during the coffee break, and we'll be announcing things as the program continues. Right now, we're just waiting for our guests of honor to come through, but other than that, I look forward to hosting you together with Lorna for the next 2 days at the first ever Eisenhower Fellowships Conference happening in Africa. Let's give a round of applause to that. I think that's a historic moment. And to all the fellows, the trustees that are here from all over the world, it's an honor, it's a pleasure to be hosting you and to be with you for the next couple of days. I'll come back to the stage shortly. And Lorna, thank you for introducing me. I look forward to be working with you and having fun and listening to very insightful conversations from our fellows, from our guests, from different people from the private and public sector in Rwanda and across Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd help me in welcoming our guest of honor, who is here, His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Rwanda, here at the Eisenhower Fellowships Conference. Thank you very much. Please be seated. Your Excellency, President Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda, George Dalama, Eisenhower Fellowships President, Honorable Ministers, Eisenhower Fellowships Trustees, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed, welcome to the first Eisenhower Fellowships Conference on the continent. My name is Diana Mpisi. I am an Eisenhower Fellow from 2017. I'll be one of the directors of ceremonies for this two-day, very, very delightful to be here, two-day conference. I am going to be doing this together with Eisenhower Fellow, Lorna Irungu Macharia from Kenya. She is a cohort from 2016, and you also heard earlier on. This is a historic conference, as I said before, in the history of Eisenhower Fellowships, because it's the first time that it is happening on the African continent, and Rwanda is truly honored to have been chosen to host this event. Today, Your Excellencies, today Africa has over 270 fellows across the continent. And today in this room, we have over 60 fellows represented by 20 nationalities from countries as far as Brazil, the United Kingdom, Australia, Spain, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Nigeria, Kenya, Tanzania, and many more that I don't have time to mention. But thank you very much for the representation in this room, and a round of applause to all the fellows that could make it here. I won't say much on the Eisenhower Fellowships because I'm going to leave that to the speakers after me. But just very briefly, as you all know, Eisenhower Fellowships was started in 1953 under President Dwight Eisenhower. And it is a fellowship that aims at identifying, empowering, and connecting innovative leaders through a transformative fellowship experience and lifelong engagement in a global network of dynamic change agents committed to creating a world more peaceful, prosperous, and just. And we'll be hearing more of that during this two-day conference, engagements with Eisenhower Fellows, captains of industry from across the world, as well as from the government of Rwanda. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce the next item. It's a short video, and I would like us to just direct our eyes to the screen, a short video on the globalization across the world. And I would like the IT people to just set up the video as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
He has the right to learn what matters. She can dream to achieve because she is able. They can believe they're the future's innovators. They have the right to dream for a future that is stable. We believe we can better the world around us. So we challenge ourselves to think beyond our scope. We identify, empower, and inspire leaders. For it is in them we entrust our hope. Started in 1953 in honor of Dwight Eisenhower, the 34th President of the United States of America, Eisenhower Fellowships exists to inspire leaders around the world to challenge themselves to think beyond their current scope, to engage others, including those outside of their current networks, and to leverage their own talents to better the world around them. In this year's regional conference, we are focused on the future of Africa's global integration.
Africa's accelerated growth will not be short-lived. Action-oriented policies focused on inclusive economic growth, creation of productive capacity, and investment in vitally needed infrastructure hold center stage now. Leaders and citizens are poised to ensure that the African Continental Free Trade Zone benefits all. Economic borders are progressing towards non-existence. The African continent, secure in itself, can and will secure its rightful position in the global marketplace. Achieving that goal, however, will require the participation of everyone globally.
With near-term global economic growth and trade tensions dominating conversations, how is Africa rising to the challenge of this new wave of globalization and collaborate to disrupt? Together with policymakers, business leaders, and the youth, we are working at fostering new partnerships aimed at creating a just, peaceful, and prosperous world that reverses rising inequality.
In Africa, Eisenhower Fellows are composed of over 200 business leaders, entrepreneurs, and policy influencers. This number grows every year. With wider engagement, heightened creativity and collaboration, and together with those outside the network, we will significantly contribute to Africa's preparedness for inclusive global socio-economic growth in this fast-changing, technology-driven era.
We are determined to contribute towards new frameworks for national, regional, continental, and global cooperation to drive inclusive economic growth. We are also seeking to contribute to innovative ways to reframe education systems and skills development to prepare youth for the future of work. Input their knowledge and skills towards strategies for bringing the digital divide for a globally inclusive socio-economic development agenda. And support redesigning of policies that will accelerate free movement of ideas, people, goods, and services.
We are excited to bring the Eisenhower Fellowship's Regional Conference to Africa for the very first time. The pace at which Africa continues to contribute to global policy and socio-economic growth is significant and sustainable. Together, we will contribute towards accelerating the rate at which the benefits of this remarkable upturn can impact all across the continent.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are so pleased to welcome you to the first ever Eisenhower Fellowship Africa Regional Conference. We look forward to connecting with you and sustaining a relationship that will create a better world for all.
Thank you very much. I would like to call the next speaker to just share her brief remarks with us. Florence Gatome is the country senior partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers. You just saw her on screen right now. She is also the chair of the Rwanda Eisenhower Fellowships chapter that started in 2016, as well as a 2010 Eisenhower Fellow. Florence, welcome.
Your Excellency, Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda, George Delama, President, Eisenhower Fellowship, Eisenhower Fellowship trustees and fellows, distinguished guests, all protocol observed, good morning. Muraho, Machi, hello, Jambo, how far, Koyo, Sabubona, Ayubowan. From Africa, hello from Africa. A very well welcome to you all, and thank you for being here today. We are honored to host this year's Eisenhower Fellowships Regional Conference, the first to be held in Africa since the fellowship was started in 1953 in honor of Dwight Eisenhower, the 34th President of the United States of America. And we're moving to being united in Africa also. As you saw in the video earlier, Eisenhower Fellowships exist to inspire leaders all over the world to challenge themselves, to think beyond their current scope, engage others, and leverage their own talents to better the world around them. The Eisenhower Fellowships Rwanda chapter began in 2016. Today, we are delighted that Rwanda was selected by Eisenhower Fellowships to host this conference in recognition of exemplary leadership that has seen the country rise from the ashes, just 25 years after the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. We are here today in this room as a result of the collective and global effort from Eisenhower Fellows from all over the world. And for this, I would like to ask all the fellows to stand up for a show of recognition. Without you all, this significant conference would not have been possible. I'll ask all Eisenhower Fellows to stand up so that we recognize you. Thank you for coming today. These are Eisenhower Fellows from across the world, from over 20 countries. The theme of the conference is the future of Africa's global integration. We have conversation leaders in both the public and private sector taking us through these discussions with the aim of proposing concrete actions that can shape policy. We look forward to interacting with you all during the conference, and we are at your disposal to ensure your stay is comfortable and your engagements successful. To enable you to experience this beautiful country, Day 3 of the conference is dedicated to touring Rwanda. We are also available to set up meetings for participants interested in investment opportunities or business meetings. We wish you all great dialogue and outcomes over the next 2 days. Thank you all, and I wish you all fruitful deliberations. Miracles Shane. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Florence. And now to the next part of the program, I would like to introduce the President, Eisenhower Fellowships, George Delama. If I may just say a few things before I welcome him on stage. George Delama is President of the Eisenhower Fellowships. George is also a nationally prominent journalist, for those of you who may not know, former international development official, entrepreneur. Delama became Eisenhower Fellowship's 10th president in August 2014. He worked for 3 decades at the Chicago Tribune, rising up to the newsrooms, in the newsroom ranks from summer reporting intern to metropolitan reporter. George was also a national and foreign correspondent, and then he rose to the chief of correspondence, associate managing editor, deputy managing editor, and ultimately managing editor for news. The national magazine Hispanic Business twice named him among the nation's 100 most influential Hispanics, and Porter magazine twice selected him as one of the 100 most powerful Latinos in the United States. If I may say a small anecdote, I personally met George when I was part of the Eisenhower Fellows in 2017. And George, as I said, is a Chicago native, and he introduced us to a pizza, and this pizza is called the Deep Dish Chicago Pizza. I'm sure you've all heard of it. And George, I just want you to know that that pizza, I found out early last year, is actually available in Kigali. So I hope that I'll be able to take you to this particular place. I don't think it will be as good, but I was just happy to see that particular pizza in Kigali. Without further ado, I welcome you for your remarks on the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you for your kind words, and thank you and Lorna for being our elegant MCs of this conference. Good morning, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, old and new friends. It is really my great honor to stand with this impressive group of dignitaries, fellows, trustees, and supporters of Eisenhower Fellowships at our first regional conference in Africa. Before I begin, I'd like to take a moment to give a special thanks to Florence Gatomi for the immense undertaking that made this day possible. Let's give her a heartfelt round of applause. In a relatively short period of time, Florence and some of our other wonderful fellows have put together a dazzling program with a distinguished roster of speakers, present company excluded. There are far too many of you to name: chief executives and NGO leaders, captains of industry and commerce, and the arts, captains of industry and commerce and the arts. We even have some journalists here with us today. But nonetheless, it is an impressive group indeed. If I may, I will like to mention only one special guest now. We're pleased to welcome President Paul Kagame, our guest of honor, with whom I will have the privilege of engaging in a conversation on stage in a short while. Mr. President, thank you for joining us here today. Also with us are 3 distinguished trustees of Eisenhower Fellowships. You just saw one on screen: Kimball Chen from the United States, Shahid Mahmood from Pakistan, and Solomon Kai from China. Gentlemen, welcome and thank you for traveling so far to be with us. I come bearing warm greetings and an expression of support from our distinguished chairman of the Eisenhower Fellowships Board of Trustees, former United States Secretary of Defense, Robert M. Gates. I have also been in touch with our former chairman, General Colin Powell, in Washington. He wanted me to tell you how pleased he was to know that this conference was going forward and how proud he was of our Africa Fellows for putting it together. It was under General Powell's leadership that we hosted our first Africa program in 2016, the first regional program in the history of Eisenhower Fellowships to focus exclusively on leaders from 8 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. This was a special group and a special program. We had more than 800 African leaders apply for 24 slots. Not surprisingly, the fellows who came through that process were outstanding. President Barack Obama thought so. He invited our Africa Fellows to the White House, where he warmly welcomed us, greeted every single fellow individually, and thanked them for their amazing work they're doing in their nations, and for strengthening relations between their countries and the United States. This was 2 weeks before our last presidential election, a time of great political upheaval in the United States. President Obama's gracious hospitality in the Rose Garden of the White House underscored the essential nonpartisan nature of Eisenhower Fellowships. We are an independent, non-governmental, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that serves to connect leaders around the world. We're seeing the fruits of those connections here today in Rwanda, a country that has risen from the bitter ashes of ethnic hatred and destruction to rebuild itself and restore hope to its young people. This process of rebirth has gone on for more than 25 years now. There is still much work to be done to make sure everyone benefits equally, but that is something we can say about every country, including our own. As Diana mentioned, well, Diana didn't mention, I thought she was going to mention, but I wanted to mention, I have a personal family connection to Rwanda. My niece Rebecca served for 2 years here in the US Peace Corps. She has told me that she'll be forever humbled and inspired by the power of the dignity of the people she met here. So for my entire family, I thank you for that. For Eisenhower Fellowships, our engagement with Rwanda began with our 2016 Regional Africa program, which included the first group of Rwandan fellows we had ever hosted in the United States. That historic program also saw us host the first Eisenhower Fellows from Ghana and Liberia in more than a quarter century. They joined fellows from Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe. The program was a cornerstone of a long-term commitment of Eisenhower Fellowships to Africa. And for me personally, this program and these fellows will always have a special place in my heart. This was the first program I proposed to the Board of Trustees when I first came to Eisenhower Fellowships 5 years ago. So as you can imagine, I am deeply moved to be here with all of you today. Diana beat me to this, but, or Florence, I'm sorry, beat me to this, but can I ask all of the fellows in our 2016 Africa program to please stand and be recognized? All the fellows in the Africa program in 2016. And now, all the other fellows from across Africa, if you could also please stand. And now, finally, all of our other Eisenhower Fellows from around the world, please. Let's give them another hand. I am honored to be your colleague. Ladies and gentlemen, these exceptional leaders are diverse, dynamic doers. They're doing amazing work and having a profound impact all over the world. They are what we do, why we do what we do. We have many people to thank for this remarkable gathering in Kigali. Let me begin by thanking some of our sponsors here today. Samaila Zubairu and the Africa Finance Company, Mo Ibrahim, the Africa Export-Import Bank, Edward Mungai and Kenya Climate Innovation Center, Yusuf Abubakar, and Boside Alfolabi. Thank you all. Let's give them a big hand, ladies and gentlemen. When we put together our Regional Africa program in 2016, we made a 5-year commitment to intensifying our work across the continent. This 5-year plan included bringing our Africa Fellows to regional EF gathering in Europe, which we did at our Future of Work conference in Malaga in 2017. We brought many of fellows from this program to a South Asia conference in Dubai that year as well. This 5-year plan called for bringing them the following year to Philadelphia, which we did a year ago in May, when our Africa Fellows came up on stage to present General Powell with a beautiful gift at his gala retirement dinner. And we made a commitment to host a regional gathering of Eisenhower Fellows in Africa, something the organization has never done before in its 66-year history. So here we are today, making history. For more than 6 decades, Eisenhower Fellowships has worked to build bridges across borders and cultures, connecting leaders of all faiths and nationalities around the world in President Eisenhower's belief that dialogue between men and women of goodwill creates understanding that allows confrontation to give way to collaboration. In today's angry, anxious, and often unsettling times, this mission and these fundamental principles continue to guide and illuminate EF's work. Just as they have through countless global crises and times of conflict in years past, during 11 successive U.S. administrations, both Republican and Democratic, through wars hot and cold. Eisenhower Fellows build bridges and tear down the walls that divide us. This is what they do. This is who we are. The Eisenhower Fellowship's mission and core beliefs that inspire us to work towards a world more peaceful, prosperous, and just are not just passing fancies or fashionable slogans. They are the enduring values that forge our common bond, bringing together leaders of all ethnicities, skin colors, and religions to collaborate across national and cultural barriers, be they Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, Hindu, Sikh, Taoist, or any other creed. Once again this spring, we saw this beautiful mix of humanity when EF welcomed to Philadelphia in our global program 23 fellows from around the world. We also hosted an additional Island of Ireland program, bringing together 14 exceptional leaders from Northern Ireland and Ireland. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this program because it goes to the root of our history and our mission. This special program marked the 30th anniversary of another groundbreaking Eisenhower Fellowships program that also brought together leaders from Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland back in 1989. Our newest Irish Fellows heard about the extraordinary history of that group from two of the 1989 Fellows at an event we held just 2 weeks ago at the University of Chicago. One of our Chicago Fellows in the USA program, Jason Coleman, who's here on fellowship in Rwanda, was at this, where are you, Jason? There he is. He was at this event a couple weeks ago, so he can tell you what I'm about to share with you. This event was with two fellows from the 1989 class, David Lavery and Patty Tien. They met on fellowship, and a few years later, they found themselves as the respective chiefs of staff to David Trimble, the leader of Northern Ireland, and Bertie Ahern, the Prime Minister of Ireland. And they found themselves across the table from each other negotiating the Good Friday Peace Agreement. David and Patty told their amazing story in Chicago 2 weeks ago of how they did this negotiation through a relationship of trust built through Eisenhower Fellowships that helped bring together enemies once considered implacable and forge a peace that was once considered unthinkable. Over the years, they and the other Eisenhower Fellows from that program have played an important role in maintaining that peace that they secured more than 2 decades ago. And to me, this goes right to the promise and the power of the special brand of citizen diplomacy that is the hallmark of Eisenhower Fellowships. In this distinguished tradition, I'm delighted to announce that Eisenhower Fellowships will host 2 dynamic, specialized programs in the next 2 years. In the fall of 2020, we will host our 3rd Women's Leadership Program, bringing together women leaders from all fields from around the world for 6 weeks in the United States. There are some members of our last Women's Leadership Program are here with us today. Then, in the fall of 2021, Eisenhower Fellowships, I'm delighted to announce, will host another historic regional Africa program, inviting fellows from across the continent to travel to the United States for individualized fellowships, just like the first group did in 2016. Both of these programs underscore our strategic imperative in intensifying our work in women's leadership and on the continent of Africa, where so much of humanity's future resides. These programs follow on the heels of our next special EF initiative. We're having a global conference on the future of education in Cartagena, Colombia, February 13th to 16th in 2020. In September 2017, to back up a little bit, we brought 330 people from 49 countries to Malaga, Spain, to explore the subject of the future of work. Now we plan to do the same for education in Cartagena on the Colombian Caribbean coast of South America. This vibrant gathering will bring together Eisenhower Fellows and prominent experts from all nations to address this issue of pressing importance in every region of the world, including Africa, which holds some 1.4 billion people, roughly 17% of the world's population. Like so many other regions, Africa has a young population. Securing their future is a daunting challenge, but also an amazing opportunity. So addressing the future of education is an issue critical to these young people and to the rise of Africa. Only through better preparation, integration, and cooperation can the immense combined power and potential of the African countries be fully harnessed. Ultimately, I share the belief of many of you here that progress and stability in a region of rich ethnic and religious diversity can be achieved only through a promise of shared opportunity and prosperity. Over the next couple of days here in Kigali, we will address the future of Africa's integration into the global economy and attendant challenges, such as how to reframe education systems to prepare young people for the future of work, how to bridge the digital divide to drive sustainable development for marginalized populations, how to think about redesigning policies to accelerate the free movement of people, ideas, goods, and services. We will discuss the need to foster regional connectivity, to create employment opportunities and implement governance reform to benefit all. So we have an exciting couple of days ahead. A glance at the latest headline tells us that much work remains to be done. Eisenhower Fellows in every corner of the world today are embracing the challenge, rolling up their sleeves and getting down to work. This continues with all of us here today. Eisenhower Fellows build bridges, one leader at a time. We stand with you today on the African continent in the firm belief that the mission of Eisenhower Fellowships is more relevant and important than ever. Thank you. Thank you. Now it is my pleasure to welcome up on the stage His Excellency Paul Kagame, the President of the Republic of Rwanda. Mr. President, thank you. I should start by saying General Powell told me to please give his personal regards to President Kagame, which I did when we met outside here. He's, as I said, delighted that we're here today. We're going to talk a little bit, we're going to have a little bit of a conversation about the future, what the future holds for Rwanda and for Africa. And then we'll open up the forum to questions from the audience. So thank you, Mr. President. It's an honor to be in your beautiful country. It is especially timely and proper that we would be discussing globalization and economic development in Rwanda. A small country, but in boxing terms from my family's native Cuba, a small country that punches above its weight. The World Bank, in its most recent available economic update, says of Rwanda, quote, "The country has entered the third decade of uninterrupted economic growth and social progress. Rwanda's global income ranking improved from the 7th poorest in 2000 to the 20th in 2015. On the back of Rwanda's strong commitment to good governance, the principles of market economy, and openness." That is a glowing assessment. Let me read you another. The World Economic Forum, in an evaluation published last year, said this of Rwanda, quote, "The East African nation of Rwanda has come a long way. Only 24 years after the genocide that ripped apart the country's socio-economic fabric, it now has a fast-growing economy with an average GDP growth of around 8% a year between 2001 and 2015. The nation has made significant strides to enhance healthcare delivery to its population as it keeps demonstrating its appetite to undertake ambitious new approaches to addressing its challenges." Congratulations on those achievements, Mr. President. You have much to be proud of. You have said you want to create a knowledge economy and to transform Rwanda into the Singapore of Africa. Yet obviously much remains to be done to combat the poverty, lack of education, and inequality that still persist in your country and the continent. So, take us, if you will, let's start. Take us through Rwanda's journey up to now. And what have been the biggest obstacles? What are the biggest obstacles that remain?
Well, first of all, give back my greetings to General Powell and hope to one day have him visit our country. Before I come to that, with all those impressive things you have said about Rwanda. A couple of things. One, we know there is a lot of work to do to be where we want to be. So we have to really work very hard. But we know we can count on not only ourselves, but others for cooperation and collaboration. Those are key for us to be able to continue making progress. So if you look at a little bit in our history, of course, coming from if you see the situation 25 years ago, the challenges looked insurmountable. But the only alternative was to give it a try and see what we can do. And because our country had sunk so low we saw it that the only way we have to go is up. So we tried our best and started rising from the deep pit where our history and other factors had put us. So today, as we have reconciled our society, our country, and built institutions, and so the rest is to make sure that we keep the growth that we have registered, as you mentioned, in the recent past, to continue and make it sustainable. So we count on everybody's inputs, everybody's participation, meaning countrymen and women, as well as I said, the partnerships we forge both within the region and across the world.
So across Africa, if we can take it beyond Rwanda right now, a lot has been happening to drive trade integration. There's the Africa Continental Free Trade Area that was recently ratified, opening up borders to ease the movement of people and goods, one network area for Africa, a single airspace, a peace fund, and many other initiatives. What is driving this new wave of integration, and what is required for it to be sustainable?
First, there is realization, though it has come a bit too late, that standing together as a continent, everybody benefits. While if we operate as individual countries, as we have done for a very long time, we don't get anywhere. So there is that realization. Every African country realizes that they benefit more by working with others. And I think it has come about because of two things. One is that realization by the Africans themselves. The other is the external factors that also contributed to having a divided continent, I think have been either slowing down or disappearing in a sense, because those external factors were originating indeed from outside, and I think the outside is now more preoccupied with their own problems also than simply thinking everything about them is fine and all they have to do is manipulate things, and starting with Africa. So I think this is an opportune moment for Africa to correct many of the mistakes we have made, and we've made a lot of mistakes, I think, even with full knowledge of what we need to do and what affects our people, our economies, and so we still made those mistakes. I think Africans are erring in a sense to try and address our problems.
So looking at those mistakes historically, what do you think, how would you identify the biggest mistakes, and what do you think needs to be done to ensure that Africa has the largest number of young people in the world? What do you think needs to be done to ensure that this large section of the population is not left behind and is actively involved in this process?
Well, it has to start with the young people of Africa themselves. I think they've got to learn the history of Africa and ask questions. Questions in a sense that if you look at Africa from one country to another and in totality, the size of the population you mentioned and the natural resources, the wealth, enormous wealth, then people should be asking, why is it that parts of the world that were at the same level of economic standing and well-being, let's say 40, 50 years ago, as you know, there are countries we know we're at that same level with our continent. Today, they are tens, hundreds of times better off than Africa. So the question must be, so what went wrong? And this is a question everyone should be answering, including the young ones. Otherwise, how do they correct the mistakes if they don't study deeply and ask these serious questions themselves? And they must also understand that they owe it to themselves to be able to stand up to these challenges of the day and actually address what needs to be addressed. But always one thing will be cutting across, and that is how does Africa, how do African countries work together with the rest of the world. In the past, there has been a lot of talk about working together with the rest of the world, cooperation and so on and so forth, but in real terms it hasn't happened. We found that Africa has always been at the receiving end of things and not contributing much to ourselves to really, lift ourselves to the level where we should be. So the young people are a huge asset for our continent, but they need to stand up and to these challenges and ask these questions and do things about that. And we stop repeating ourselves over and over, defining the problems so well, and I think everybody understands what needs to be done, but very few end up doing what needs to be done.
So, as I mentioned in my remarks earlier, the essence of Eisenhower Fellowships is building bridges across borders, but also across cultures. And Rwanda has had to do this over the last quarter century. Your nation has made tremendous strides in overcoming its darkest moment, the genocide of the 1990s amid the horrific ethnic conflict that exploded here 25 years ago. And this has entailed investing and believing in your greatest national resource, Rwanda's human capital. Yet, Amnesty International and other analysts believe that a quarter century later, more can be done to protect human rights and ensure that Rwanda becomes more inclusive and that everyone benefits equally from the advances this country has made, and that all segments of the population can share equally in the democratic political life of the nation and in its progress in the future. So how do you see this intricately complicated, deeply sensitive, incredibly important process playing out now, and as you look to the future? And what role can Eisenhower Fellowships play in supporting these efforts and helping Africa and Rwanda continue to progress and advance its sustainable development for the benefit of all your citizens?
I think one way we could be helped, especially by those who level too much criticism without much study about the context and circumstances, is by paying less attention to us. And understand that we are people like them who mind our business and also need to take care of our well-being. And I'm not just saying this for the sake of it. In a way, my argument has been vindicated. We have had too much time. The rest of the world telling Rwanda, telling Africa what needs to be done, what they need to do. In fact, even taking it to a level where they take that position that they understand what we need than we actually understand ourselves. And I think it's absolutely falsehood. It's even wrong. They must even understand that we are offended by it because we don't accept that position where we can always be told what to do, what not to do, endlessly. You see, it's like you keep teaching me what I need to be doing, and you give an impression that there is no point at which I will even qualify or graduate to actually take over that responsibility myself. It becomes something that goes on for decades. I think it is absolutely wrong. Now, let me talk about Rwanda specifically. For those things you have read out and mentioned about the progress that has been made, that progress could not have been made unless the people of Rwanda have been part of that progress. And if they have been, therefore, it's like saying, well, Rwanda has, made these achievements, and even saying they have got good results by doing wrong things. I mean, it doesn't add up. So, whatever mistakes we have made as a country, I actually find these mistakes similar to those mistakes being made across the world. Because, as you know very well, and I think you did mention that, the whole world is in distress on all accounts. Politics, the economies, social matters. The whole world, you would assume, is in turmoil. So why don't we get the benefit of getting a break from these people? And so that we now work together for all of us to address our problems, because who doesn't have problems? And in fact, in our case, the problem is some of our problems, as I said, are originating from outside. They are not even our own problems. And in fact, that's why part of the reasons of continue to make good progress is that we've looked for, within to get some of the solutions to our problems. Let me give you an example of Gacaca, the justice system we used to address the justice issues we had here, enormous. So many hundreds of thousands, going into millions of people who killed and those millions who died. Now, two things. Could we have taken the path of saying, let's see justice done through as we know it, justice systems, modern justice systems, where we have people processed through the courts of law and so on and so on. One, the courts of law did not exist in our country. Okay, that's why they established the tribunal, the ICTR, that was based in Arusha. I'll quickly tell you that ICTR tried about no more than 70 cases successfully and consumed $2.5 billion to do that. We used Gacaca processed over 1 million cases at a cost of $37 million and settled our country. And it is at peace with itself. But you will hear people saying, they did that at the beginning and we ignored them and went ahead with what we had to do because we understood the benefits. But they were saying, we were making a big mistake and we are violating rights of people, and because, those accused do not have defense lawyers, and they went, so we don't meet the international standards. So the process that met the international standards gave us 70 cases tried at a cost of $2.5 billion, and the process that was being looked at as violating rights of people and so on cost 37 million US dollars, and we actually settled our people, and they are back in their homes, living together, working together, and that's why we're making this progress. So, some of this stuff is really trash. I mean, if you listen to it too much, you will end up doing nothing and only being worried about being criticized and doing nothing. So for us, we have decided to take matters in our own hands and deal with our problems the way we should deal with them, and be together with our people and let the results speak for themselves.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. On that note, I'd like to open up the floor to the audience. Questions from the audience?
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, President Paul Kagame. Thank you very much, George Delama, Eisenhower Fellowship's President. I'd like to just take this moment that it was brought to my attention, if you can start with this. There's some fellows in the room who had specific questions, and I'd like to start with them. And then I'd like to also open up to youth who are here from Ghana, from different parts of Africa. So I'd like to start with a couple of fellows that have been brought to my attention. And with that, I would like to ask, I think there's someone, these names have been brought to my attention. Yawa, is Yawa in the room? Here you are.
Hello, Mr. President, and thank you for being with us today. I have two questions. The first is, as I look across the continent, there are lots of programs now for youth around entrepreneurship and getting more people employed. Youth unemployment is a big issue. But I wonder, and I worry personally, that there's not enough attention being given to kind of the next generation government leaders. So I wonder with your government, and how do you see the pipeline being filled? I wonder especially because as we think about the future of work and we think about a world where there may be driverless cars, for example, I wonder how on the continent we're preparing the policymakers who can help us deal with that. My second question is a bit lighthearted. They say that for every good leader, you need to be balanced, you need to be whole, and Rwanda has gone through dark chapters in its history, and under your remarkable leadership, this country has turned around. So you must be very serious. But I also wonder, what do you do for fun?
For fun, I also enjoy these challenges. I'll come to that later. The future leaders, let me say this. Once we have invested in our young people, a number of things, for education, acquire knowledge, and so on and so forth, and also mindful of the health of our people, our population, including, therefore, the young people, because they need to have good health. That's why we try to do things so we want educated, healthy population, young people who can do things. So once you've provided this as a foundation, I think you're already developing future leaders. Don't wait for a moment where, somebody is being trained to be a leader. No, I don't think that is your part. The young people, once you've got education, you have good health, you are meeting these challenges you have to deal with. Actually, that is the way leaders start developing, without just thinking you'll be molded into a leader, going through a chamber where there is, I think providing that kind of environment where you are freely developing your talent based on that foundation of education and good health. And I think leaders would emerge, and they would emerge by how they respond to these challenges and try to address them. This is what we try to encourage when it comes to our young people. We're telling them, don't wait for baptism, for somebody to come and baptize you as a leader. You know, you just get going. And once you've got these basics and these tools, the sky for you should be the limit. Otherwise, for the more interesting part of the question, the last one, I think it depends on how you divide your time and attention. And one must understand that you don't live for just one thing. I think we live for many things. We live for work, we need to do work. It's time for that. You put as much into it as you can, time, effort, and so on. But we are human beings. We have families. We need to pay attention to our family and take comfort in that. We have friends. We have activities out there that you do not only for fun, but also for your own good health. So I tend to find time for all those things, and knowing that it can't be one without the other. It has to be a bit of each of them, and they all add up to something that gives you good results. So I'm a sports fan. I enjoy soccer, what others call football. I watch and enjoy basketball. I play tennis. I do workout, and so I always find in a day of 24 hours, I always tend to find 30 minutes for this, an hour for that, and maybe one of these things takes a little more time than the others. So, but that's how we keep going. Of course, I don't forget to find some sleep and and have some rest. Yeah.
As well. Is Nuru in the house? Just very quickly.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I'm Nuru from Kenya. And I personally think that climate change is the biggest risk facing Africa. But at the same time, it's our biggest opportunity. So my question for you is, how can we leverage on the AU framework to inform policy that will make Africa more climate change resilient from an adaptation to a mitigation standpoint? And from a fun perspective, I have a 12-year-old who wants to be a robotic engineer. And I was wondering, do robots scare you or excite you? And would you drive around Kigali in an autonomous car?
Yes. Well, I have driven myself. I don't mind somebody or something taking over and doing that. I have no problem with that. So I think I would enjoy and be fascinated by robots more than fearing them. But you always want, even whether you are dealing with human beings, in fact, even in the car driven by people, I'm actually worried. I worry if the driver on the steering wheel sleeps. Maybe he didn't have enough sleep last night. So if he starts napping on the steering wheel, what happens? I have to be worried about that. So I would worry even about the robots. The robots might also go to sleep. I don't know. So you have to remain cautious and a dose of worry, even when you are doing very well, that tends to check things and maybe bring in a good perspective. So I think science, engineering, things like that, they bring about very complicated, sophisticated systems that we need to be really fascinated by and think hard about and see where they take us and what they give us relative to what we want, and and then be cautious, think about the likely dangers also that come along and find a way of reducing that. So with climate change, I think so many, again, stories are out there about climate change and how that is affecting the whole world, all of us. And again, science shows to non-believers also empirically how things might actually be affecting us negatively, and we need to pay attention to that. And yet, from that data that is available, we are also shown some of the things that could be done to lead to adaptation or mitigation of these challenges we face. So it's not enough, therefore, for one country, for one person to be thinking, right? It's important that we need to be doing things also in reality based on what we know. And again, we are better off if we do things together, and if at the AU level, countries can work together, can share best practice in many areas, and do things that will not only address problems of one country, but all of us as a continent.
Thank you very much. Before I open it to other fellows from across the world to ask their questions, I would like just the youth that are here from Ghana and Kenya, if they can show us where they are. If we can have one question from the youth in Ghana, and one question from the youth from Kenya. Are you from Ghana or Kenya? Okay.
Thank you very much. My name is Amma Duncan. I'm founder of the Fabulous Woman Network from Ghana, and I work a lot with the youth in Ghana as well. And I'm really excited to be here in Rwanda. I had one very pressing question on my way, ever since I've heard of Rwanda. My question is, how has Rwanda managed to have such a strong brand internationally? Pictures we see of Rwanda, it's always clean, the people are nice and very cultural. So I had the privilege to sit by your Minister of Youth, Rosemary, and the first question I posed to her was, what's your secret? And she tells me it's 3 things. So it's the president, the youth, and the women. So I actually just tweeted that. But my question to you is, as a leader, how are you able to rally all these different people to run with your vision? Like, how are you able to get everybody to be clean and everybody to be passionate? Because I'm taking that back home with me, and I need to know your secret. Thank you.
Well, I assume the president represents men, right? So we need young people, men and women. So, some of these big things come out of little small things that you may do or fix here and there. Let me tell you, well, there are things we can't take credit for that just happen without necessarily. If we have good climate, we have a beautiful country, we have nice people. Some of it is not because we have worked hard to achieve. They have just happened maybe by themselves. But let me talk about some of the things that are doable, and then you do about cleanliness. you see across the country or in this city, that came from choice that was made about close now to 15 years ago. And it starts by asking ourselves. I remember certain moments we were in the cabinet of ministers, and I was saying, look, if we look back in our history, where even in rural areas, even in poor, we used to see our mothers or aunties cleaning around the homestead, and you find it's a poor home, but it is a very clean home. And he made it very beautiful, and actually people living in a clean environment, you know, benefit from that. So I said, how about if we elevated that to the level of our city, our villages, and our country? Aren't we likely to get the same benefits? Does that require donors to give us money for it? That is something we can do ourselves, and then build on that with whatever else we get from friends and partners and do something else. So that's how it evolved. And we said, but we must have a framework within which we can do this. And then we started saying, how about doing it every month, mobilize our population and say, let's do something that moves in that direction. And then actually it moved from just being cleaning around to building something. We started building schools, clinics, roads, and this, and with our own hands. And we could see results over time. Something that may sound symbolic, but it made, that time, for example, I had my own children studying in primary school here, and I would take turns with my wife to drive them to school and bring them back home. And sometimes when we are driving and I saw, litter, and I would stop the car, get out. I have these security brothers who run after me, around me. And they would say, let's pick these things, they look bad. And then put them in the right place, in the trash bin, and then go back to the car. And, people around would, at that time, I started actually when I was that time vice president, and then when I became president. But the people around who had not given thought about that would wonder, why does the vice president, one, have to be driving his children to school? Because, as you know, there is also a mentality which I think we could be served well by doing away with it. Some of our brothers and sisters, when they are appointed to those positions you're talking about, they really become too big to do anything. But I was doing it so that even as the vice president you appointed, or the president, can stop and do something, or can take their children to school. So my children are my children. They are not my driver's children, they also have their own children. And they also have families to take care of. I want them to be able to take care of their families and so on. So from that's how it started. And then we talked about it everywhere. It would be in many places across our country talking about this. Why don't we do this? And then everybody picks it, said, why don't we do this? And because there was that demonstration effect of the benefits as well. And why not? As just decent human beings, there are things we need to be doing, not to run away from and expect others to be the ones to do. And And it doesn't matter what positions we hold. We hold positions for different responsibilities, but when it comes to really this life we live as human beings, there are certain things we need to come down to us to be able to deal with.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. The youth from Kenya, yes, if the usher could please give her the microphone.
Is it morning or afternoon? Afternoon? Oh,
Both,
morning, everyone.
maybe.
I'm
It's both.
Susan, delegate from Kenya. Mine is not a question. I'm here to speak on behalf of the youth. When you go back at Kenya, we are usually told we are the future leaders. Tomorrow's leader. Our tomorrow never reach. By the time it reach, I'm no longer a youth. So, for us as youth, we need an opportunity to be given so that we can speak on what we want. When you go to the hospital, it's like the nurse knows what you want more than what you want yourself. When you go to school, the teachers knows what you want more than the way you want yourself. When you go back at home, maybe your father wanted to be a doctor. He never qualified. Now he wants you to be a doctor on behalf of him. So as youth, we need an opportunity to be given to say what we want. Not for people to dedicate for us what they want. Thank you.
So sometimes when you are not given, let me make a comment. You demand it. Yes, don't wait until you are given. Okay, you insist and demand it, and
I'm just going to ask the ushers to move around and open the floor to not the ones that were brought to my attention, but just generally. I think we can start with the lady right next to you. Please.
Thank you very much. My name is Beulah from Kenya, a missionary. And first, it's giving God glory for Africa and what he's done, because he's done opposition's leaders and removes leaders. So I believe even the efforts Africa has made is by the grace of God. So I thank God for positioning you as a leader for Rwanda for the time he has positioned you. Based on what you've been discussing, or what you've been saying, is about now Africa looking in and identifying where our strengths are. And I was listening to Joyce Meyer, who was saying our attitude needs to change. And as a leader who's been the African chairman, what attitude and mentality do we Africans, now coming back home, do we Africans need to change for us to know that it is time for Africa to arise? Actually, Africa is arising. And it's time for Africa to actually realize problems are good for us to be able to actually get solutions. And it has to change with the attitude of knowing that if I take a position, I can actually pick paper. And what do you think, from the governmental, from presidents to the youth, what attitudes do need to change in Africa for us to be able to arise in oneness?
Well, the main one, let me tell you our experience. Maybe when we took office about 25 years ago, when we were facing huge challenges here of rebuilding our country after the tragic events, the genocide. It is known, it is a fact, that most of our people historically were used to sitting back and knowing that the world owes them something. You know, there are these, I alluded to it much earlier on. There are these people who give impression to Africa that they are there for them, so they don't need to do much. We found people could not feed themselves for decades before even the tragic situation. It was always the World Food Program, USAID, we can list a number of them. They would just come and dish food to people in the homes, and people were happy sitting back and getting food. And if you are sick, they will come and help and treat you. So the country, in the end, gave up building institutions, investing in these productive capacities to be able to feed themselves, and so on and so forth. So what we had to do when we came in to deal with the change of mentality and mindset, we are telling people, we say, no, we as human beings, like those who feed us, are human beings too. We need to be doing some of the things ourselves, so that even if we use this aid they give us for some time trying to build these capacities, then let's do that. But we can't perpetually sit back and do nothing. You would find young people just sitting or putting their hands in their pockets and from morning to evening doing nothing, yet there is something to do around. So we had, first of all, deal with this kind of attitude. We said, no, get to work, do something. Then the others who help can help adding to what you've done, but don't wait to depend on others forever. What kind of human beings would we be if we just had to live our lives like that? And this starts at the top. It's not just those ordinary people I'm talking about. The very leaders who are comfortable with having their people being fed by good people who help those who can't help themselves. But how do you allow that forever to happen that way? So that it begins with that, in actual fact. Then the rest starts happening the way it should happen.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Eddie Mandry with Yale University. My question is on attracting talent to Rwanda. When I'm out at Yale, every now and then at graduation, I ask young Rwandans, young African students, what are your plans after graduation? And for the Rwandans, I always almost get the same answer. I'm moving back home. And it's been very impressive to see that. So what is your message when you're out there to other Africans who might be struggling with 2 jobs, trying to get a work permit when there's opportunities on the continent? Thank you.
It happens both ways. Those young people who have been out studying or working there, and it also starts with them. How do they feel as far as contributing to their countries is concerned? That is key. These young people have to make their own decisions as well, and they have to like what they are doing or to be dedicated to it, and so on and so forth. The other side is, what is it that is happening in your country that actually incentivizes you or attracts you to come back? We don't expect everyone to have the same commitment as the other. Some people just shy away from problems when they think of going back to their countries. It's like, no, we struggle with this, with that, maybe governance issues and so on. So they may say, I don't want to get involved in that. But in fact, some of them mistakenly say they don't want to get involved in politics. And we tell them, where you are, there is politics that is going to affect you. As we see it also, I think you started seeing that. In fact, it was as if I had foreseen what was. One time I was addressing, we have things we call Rwanda Day. Almost every year, we pick which place. I've done it in China, we've done it in about 4 capitals in Europe, we do it in the United States, we've done it in Canada, and so on and so forth. So several years ago, not so long ago, maybe about, well, more than 5 years ago, as I was addressing these young Rwandans on Rwanda Day, and I was trying to explain to them what we are trying to do here in their country, and we need them to come and be part of that. And they said, the fact is, we can't hide, there are going to be problems we have to deal with, all of us. Even those young people who come back, they may face some hardships. I can't say, no, you come, there's no problem, you will come and, feel good about everything. No, I just tell them the truth, that they actually find problems. Only we want them to be with us in trying to address these problems. So I told them, I said, but some of the problems you've run away from here, either they will find you here, or even worse ones will come your way when you are here. And I said, tomorrow, you will find people that belong to these places where you are, or that call it the places where you are their own, will start asking you what you are doing there. And they say, why don't you go back home? And if you delay, they will put you in a container and they ship you home. I said, they'll do that. And anyway, later on, they started doing that. At some point, that is happening, or, the cost in terms of human life, where some of our people have been going abroad and perishing, across the Mediterranean or other high seas, it's pathetic. It's still problems anyway. So why don't we come, we work together, fix the politics that needs fixing or whatever, and we work together. There is no question of saying everything will be okay. So we have been fortunate. In fact, a lot of our young people come back even without being told to do it. They do it on their own. It also started, I remember in around 2000, we sent our young people to go and study abroad in big numbers. Some of them we sent to India, others to South Africa in big numbers, then to Europe and United States. So some of the arguments people had here in our country was like, it's a waste of money. Most of these people will never come back. So my simple calculation was, like, to India we sent about, one go we sent 400 young people to go and study. And I said, one, if we are lucky, if that is true, that they may never come back, we may be lucky also, out of 400, we may have back 150. The rest may stay there. But this is 150 that I did not have before. So it's not a bad deal. The other is, it's definitely not a waste of time, even those who don't come back. If they have got their education, that's a big investment. For me, I'm happy that they are okay wherever they will be. And one day, they will come back. Or, if they don't come back, they are sending money, they have their parents here. They have, so we defeated that argument of saying it's going to be a waste of money investing in these people. And in the end, most of them came back.
Thank you you very much. Yes, I would definitely like us to just move to that side. And I'll start with Maria. I can see you. And then if I can ask the ushers to also please locate themselves on this side of the room. Maria, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Excellency. I'm Maria Sarungita. Hi from Tanzania. And apart from everything else, one thing that I think the world recognizes is that you definitely have been pushing a lot the continental free trade area. However, it's not all African countries that have signed. And currently, out of the 55 countries, only 44 have signed. Unfortunately, one of the countries that has not signed is my country, Tanzania, and you have assumed now to be the chair of the East Africa community. I would like to know how much you use your influence to make sure that the East African community countries are part of the continental free trade area, and also the rest of the countries that have not signed, sign up, and what would be your argument to convince them? Thank you.
First of all, you must take heart the fact that, in actual fact, it is going to be in effect when we meet in July in Niger, in Niamey, because the number that was required for ratification has already been reached. So that's a good thing. But those who signed are now, I think, 49. They have been going up and up. Now, you see, we have to be realistic in certain cases. We don't get everything we want as we want it. But we have to be clear about the path we are taking, whether there is progress or not. So there is progress. And we also put a provision, I mean, we put an allowance for people who think they have problems to manage first before they sign up or ratify. We are patient with that. We allow people, we allow countries to, we can't dictate. Anyway, we would have no possibility of saying, you know, this is right, you must do it, do it. We can't do that. We have no way to do it. So even with Tanzania, I'm sure they are on the path to doing that. And the only way to convince anyone, if there is a need to do that, but I think it is obvious, the continental free trade area benefits everyone. There is no question about it. Even if you start, for example, Tanzania is in the East African community, the East African community being together has shown that there is benefit to every member of the East African community. So if we have, when it comes to customs union or the common market, the benefits are clear, and the Tanzanians, whether it is the private sector or the public sector or other countries, they realize that there is a benefit, and everyone is working towards that. But there may be some delays for certain considerations. So, and we provide for that allowance for people to sort themselves out, and then we see where we get there.
One last question. I think there's a gentleman from Sri Lanka, just very quickly, and we'll move on.
His Excellency, I must first of all confess, this is my first visit to the African continent. And I was super excited to be here. From my airport all the way to the hotel, what I saw was super impressed. And when I spoke to my colleague, he said, this is our transformation story led by our president. And I'm so inspired in the morning. So like you led this transformation, I would like to know how you intend to transform Rwanda to the digital age and make Rwanda probably a digital hub of Africa.
Well, I think that is a bit of that is already happening. And it starts with, again, investing in people, investing in education, investing in technology, prioritizing that even as a matter of policy. And it's people, it's infrastructure, it's the finance in between that provides certain inputs that are required in that as well. But the real thing that drives it is having identified it and the determination to take that course and stay the course and keep going. So I think investing in people and infrastructure and making these things work together has been very beneficial.
Well, thank you with that.
There's somebody I know here who has been putting up his
Actually,
hand.
Your Excellency, if I can take direction from you, how many questions do you think you have time for?
We can take another 5 maybe.
5?
I don't mind.
Thank you.
Well, since my mind haven't indicated that I need to leave, so the problem will be counted against them, not me.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for coming to my rescue. Clearly, the lady was not inclined to give me space for whatever reason. To start with, I must applaud with many other Africans for the stance you take in terms of clarity of ownership of the agenda, as illustrated by the Gachacha issue. I think that's so important for us to be clear what we are responsible for and stand up and implement it. My only worry, though, Mr. President, and to help me understand this, is that the success that is evident in this country, if the continent has to succeed, has to be replicated elsewhere. So the challenge and the question is, how do we get that replication to happen?
Well, let me say what we happily have been doing and maybe got some good results, not in everything, but in some things, and we want to keep doing more. I don't think we do it for any lessons to anyone, or we are addressing our problems. But at the same time, we are happy to share experiences with the other countries because we also, anyway, learn a lot of things from them. Some of the things we do here, we've learned from other countries. There's no question about it, whether on our continent or elsewhere. Now, I'll give you an example that shows that a bit of that is happening. I was being told by our people last year alone, 2018, we had 27 country delegations coming here to Rwanda because they said, you know, we want to learn something you are doing in health or governance, in ICT, and so on and so forth. You see, the fact that these countries decided to say, or in agriculture and so on and so forth. I talked a little bit about food security, which we have now reached, that wasn't there so many years ago. So that already shows you some of the things would be replicated. Because even if people have made a choice to say, you know, we found something happening there that we need to do in our country, that's a good thing. And we welcome them, and in fact, we visit some of those countries ourselves when they have been here, and we say, you know, but we learned, we saw that you are doing something like this, and we want to learn how to do it. We are happy to say some of those things we've learned elsewhere, we have come here and perfected them. And it doesn't necessarily, I mean, does not have to be seen like it originated from here. It actually originated from other places. We just came and, so we have been trying our best to make sure that for us, we do what we have decided we need to do. In fact, the problems, some of the problems arise out of people know what to do, they just don't do what they know they should be doing. That's the big problem we need to unlock in some of our countries. It's not a lack of knowledge, it's not a lack of opportunities. There's some other problems.
Actually, I think the lady you mentioned.
Okay. Sorry?
I don't know.
I had actually mentioned.
But I was also raising my hand, so I'll take the mic.
So anyway, both of you can benefit from.
Thank you. So my name is Sandra Idosu. I'm from Benin Republic, but I've been working in Rwanda for the last 10 years. I've been part of engaging the business community in improving service delivery. I publish a magazine. For family reasons, I've somehow moved back to Benin for the last a year and a half. And one of the things I had wanted to have changed in Benin is actually the filth. We have plastics bags everywhere. We use plastics bags in everything we eat. So we started a petition to bring our parliament to pass a law. So today plastics bags are forbidden in our country. But in most African countries, thank you. In most African countries, once we have laws, the implementation is actually a very huge problem. Mm-hmm. And the question I want to ask you is that we started a bit our Umuganda. It's not really, we don't call it Umuganda, we call it Eco Run. We run and we remove all the trashes by the roadside. Last year when we started, we were 70 people. And the last Saturday before I traveled, we were 600 people. All citizens, all youth who believe that individually we can contribute in making our cities clean. But the question most of them would ask me, and again, most of the young people from other African countries, because they follow our campaign, is that how do we make our governments, how do we make our leaders walk their talk? Because usually they would meet, they would talk, they would come here to Rwanda, they're like, okay, we want to do this, we want to put this in place. But then once they are back home, the implementation is not done. So my question is actually coming from a lot of young people who want to do things in their countries because they believe that they can also be a change. So the question is, how do the youth push our leaders to do things that are right for us?
No, it's not how do they push, just push. Make sure that, in fact, it is already happening. You are telling us already numbers, 600. Yeah? 600 young people together doing something is not a small number. Keep growing it and keep on the pressure, but and a good pressure, because you're interacting with your leaders. It doesn't have to be the president all the time. There are other leaders at different levels. Keep insisting with them, and then maybe it will keep going up to the ultimate decision makers. And if you can go to parliament and have a law passed, you're already doing a good thing. Yeah, and so keep going, keep mobilizing. Don't be impatient. But you can be impatient in terms of wanting things to be done as fast as possible, but don't get frustrated that you're not moving as fast as you want to move because of these other obstacles. Just keep working at these obstacles and making sure they can get out of the way. And again, keep rubbing it in people's minds to say, we need to do it.
We have just two questions very quickly. The gentleman there, he's been very, very signaling at me. And the lady there, if we could have the ushers just take a microphone to the lady right there. Two questions before we wrap up.
Your Excellency, my name is Yusuf Abubakar. I am from Nigeria. And I am very interested in this issue of the African Intercontinental Trade Agreement, which is going to be signed very soon. My worry and concern has to do with what is happening in the European Union, where some countries feel that they are not benefiting from that kind of union. And in Africa here, like we have seen, there are a few oases of successes, like we can say Rwanda, South Africa, and what we see in like South Africa is where you have a lot of xenophobic attacks because of ethnic tensions and also competition of resources. And even within countries, like in my own country now, there are a lot of conflicts between herders and farmers because of issues of resources. In Mali, you have that, and a lot of other places. So my question is, what are the safeguards and what are the framework that you have put within the African trade agreement to ensure that, one, there is a general standard which every country has to meet? Because what I see with free trade, there is also free movement of people. And even looking at this region where you have Rwanda succeeding very well, I believe that you are going to have a lot of flood and swarm of people taking over very soon, and coming from the history of conflict that you are coming from. So what would be the safeguard that when we have this thing, we are not going to create more problems than less problem? More so that Europe now is dealing with restricting the African migration that we see, which you alluded to earlier on. There would be a lot of movement within Africa, and that might create more tensions and more problems.
Well, I don't think it would create more tensions. It actually, it may have side effects, it might have some problems, but not more problems than you already have. This is what I think. And anyway, so for the problems we already have, we still have to attend to them. We still have to address these problems. But the fact that we have these problems, we should not feel discouraged to try other things that in fact contribute to addressing these problems. Even if it's like earlier maybe a mention of, you see, there is technology. Technology is emerging. Technologies that have emerged that some people say they will take jobs from people, will have employment, unemployment, and so on and so forth. These technologies are a reality. So we have to keep finding ways around technologies that lead us to addressing problems that have existed for a long time, much as we should be conscious of the fact that new problems will emerge. So we should also find problems for find solutions for new problems that will emerge. So with the continental free trade area, there is, and which the underlying principle there being integration of economies and countries, the integration has huge dividends. But there might be problems also building on the earlier existing problems. So do we tap into this huge benefit and keep struggling to address the problems that have existed before and the new ones that might emerge? Or do we just give up altogether? This is what we have to keep working around. It's like you are saying, Europe. Europe has these problems across the European Union, right? But we also know Europe is developed. So in spite of these problems, Europe has continued to develop. Or other countries that are developing or have developed, they have constantly dealt with problems, different kinds of problems. So there is no point at which you have no problems to address. So you always want to understand this balance. Things that give you the benefits, from which you can draw solutions for the problems that continue to exist. So the continental free trade area is unavoidable. In fact, it is the way to go to address many challenges Africa has. But it may have some of these side effects that you have to deal with. It's like taking medicine. Medicine cures the disease, but some medicine have side effects. So you go for the medicine and deal with the side effects. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we have one last question from Miata, all the way from Liberia, Your Excellency. And yes, please. Can an usher please give her the microphone?
Another Eisenhower fellow. Your Excellency, it's important to be the last because I'm going to talk about something that affects all of us. So as I boarded the plane from Liberia, I was reminded of what is happening in the region currently relative to healthcare. So as we all sit in the room today, there's about 1,400 persons that have lost their lives in the Democratic Republic of Congo, a country that you border. We also know that Africa makes some unique history. And this is the way I would say it. So when we were battled with Ebola in West Africa, we were categorized as the first deadly Ebola outbreak. Today, DRC, that borders Rwanda, is then categorized as the second largest outbreak in history. I also am aware that Rwanda has come a long way relative to how you've worked so hard to build your healthcare system. And also we are aware of the devastating effect Ebola can have on a country, not just relative to healthcare, your economy, trade, and even relationship with other countries. So my two questions are, how well is Rwanda prepared should a case of Ebola should surface as we have seen in Uganda? How are you speaking to your neighbors? When the neighbor's house is on fire, it's important to get ready for that fire. So in response, it's my hope that Rwanda is also well prepared. Thank you.
Yeah, you remember in those tragic situations you had in the West Africa region, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and other places. In fact, a number of countries, African countries, rallied and came to your support, including some Rwandans. In fact, a couple of them, one or two of them died in that situation when they had gone to assist. So that's one good thing. And the same thing is now there were lessons learned from that situation being applied to this current situation. DRC is not alone. In fact, the whole world is trying to help. WHO has been leading the effort, and other international institutions are on the ground trying to do what they can do. And in fact, at the same time, working with us, like they are working with Uganda and others likely to be affected just by proximity, where the Ebola outbreak is in eastern Congo. It affects the other side of Uganda immediately. It may affect us. So we already, the same institutions, we have CDC, we have World Health Organization, we have different partners, partner countries helping to working with our institutions to make sure we are prepared in case. I'm sure that the same thing is happening on the side of Uganda. They must be, activating their systems, the existing systems to deal with that situation. So we are prepared, but we are as prepared as our weakest point. But we are trying, we are doing our best.
Thank you very much. I believe, George, do you want to say something?
Yes, so I wanted to take a moment and thank you, Mr. President, for so generously taking time from your busy schedule to share with us your thoughtful insights and your candor. It's not often you can sit with a head of state and have a real conversation about anything and everything. And so thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me. And then Before we move on with the rest of the conference, I wanted to give you a small gift as a gesture of our appreciation for the warm welcome we've received in your country.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Open it up. If you can hold it. It is a key to the House of Eisenhower Fellowships in Philadelphia, so you can always consider it your home.
Oh, thank you.
And I will tell you, when we gave one to President Obama, he asked the Chicago question. He said, does it work? And it does. But thank you again. Thank you very much.
My revenue authority people are interested in knowing what it is. It wasn't very expensive.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
A round of applause once again.